Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host,
Brett Gilliland.
Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland, and today I have the privilege to interview Tom Nolan. Tom, how you doing?
Great, Brett. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm great. I'm excited. You know, it's a big month in my house, and you are going to be one of the benefactors of that. Your company, Kendra Scott. It's anybody that shops at Kindra Scott knows there's a discount, and it's like I know what's happening here. You're getting my wife to go in, and she's going to buy more stuff on her birthday, but she's going to get a nice discount. So anyway, you are the CEO of Austin-based Kindra Scott, and you have been since 2021, and you served 3 years as Chief Marketing and Chief Revenue Officer, overseeing strategic revenue growth for the billion-dollar brand. And to my knowledge, you are the first CEO after Kindra Scott, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
That's a big deal. Well, awesome, man. We look forward to chatting with you about all this stuff. But before we get started, Tom, I always like to ask people what's made you the man you are today, which is a really big question I know to start with. But there's always a story back there that I may not be able to find in my research. So you can share a little bit of your backstory if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I mean, look, I think I'm still evolving every day. Hopefully, I'm getting a little bit better than I was the day before. So I don't want this or think it's the finish line yet. So keep iterating and trying to always get better. But I have a bit of a unique story. I was the only person in my family to graduate from high school, let alone go to college. And back in the day, I used to be a decent athlete, and baseball paid for college for undergrad at least. So I went to college on a baseball scholarship, ended up playing baseball and golf, which was a lot of fun. And got out of school, and turns out my dad's an electrician, so I didn't grow up kind of in the right kind of place, so to speak. So I didn't really understand internships or know any better, like you're a byproduct of what your upbringing is. And so anyway, got out of college, and I had a lot of great summer jobs. I caddied. I worked for John Sparagano's construction company. I did side jobs with my dad. I worked for roofing companies. And turns out when you graduate from college, diploma is nice, but it's even better if you have experience. I had none, so I had a really hard time finding a job. And without any relevant experience. So I just kind of started to hit the pavement to find anything, and I got a lot of no's. A lot of no's. And I tried all different sort of weird things. I got a no for doing a door-to-door Bible salesman. I don't know how you say no to that, but apparently I wasn't qualified for it. And then I just kind of tripped into an interview with a company called Ziff Davis, which was a technology publishing firm, still around today, I think, to sell classified ads in the back of PC Magazine and PC Week and PC Computing and things I knew nothing about. And I interviewed with a guy named Jason Sparks. And it's funny looking back in life, this is 25 years ago, and changed my life. So I interviewed with Jason. It was like my 20th interview after like 19 no's. And he sits down with me, and this is to sell classified ads, and the job I think paid $15,000 a year. And he asked me a pretty pointy question. He was like, "What are your goals in life?" And I gave him some kind of nonsensical 21-year-old kid answer. And he didn't approve of it and basically threw me out of his office. He's like, "I don't want to hire somebody who doesn't know where they're going in life." And it was like, looking back, and it was kind of remarkable for an entry-level position for somebody to say that. So I got my stuff, and I walked down the hallway, and I got halfway down the hallway. I was like, "Man, I can't go home, because if I go home, I'm going to wind up being an electrician. Like, I can't go home and say no again." So I turned around, I went back to Jason's office, and I was like, "Listen, if I stay up all night and come back with my goals tomorrow morning, like, can we start this over again? Clearly I didn't do a good job of doing this the right way." And he said, "Yeah, whatever." And I think he just wanted me to get out of his office. I'm sure he expected to never see me again. But I went home, and I stayed up all night, and I wrote down my goals, and I was really thoughtful about it. And I wrote down personal goals, professional goals, money I wanted to make, the job I wanted to have, the car I wanted to drive, the house I wanted to live in, the person I wanted to marry, all of it. And went up getting the job. And I'll circle back to that in a second. So in this role, it was pretty clear, like, I've never been the most talented, the smartest person, but this shapes kind of the person I am. My parents both taught me hard work and resilience and being relentless. And it was annoying, I think, as to most kids, when you're kind of put to work and have a high bar. But I had to figure everything out kind of on my own. and I was an athlete. So we sat in this like bullpen is the best way to describe it. And there was, to me, what looked like a scoreboard of like call volume. And, Mike and Rick and Sally and Mary and everybody else to do 20, 25 calls a day. And I was like, you know what? I could probably do more than that. And I was like, I'm gonna shoot to do 100 calls a day. So that became one of my goals. And I started making 100 phone calls a day. And a couple things happened. The first thing was all of my peers started to almost immediately hate me. The second thing was all of the people I worked for and people I didn't even work for, because this was a public thing, started to notice me. And then the third thing was my business got a lot better. It was just output, and it really resonated with me. It was like, okay, scoreboard check, I get that. Output check, I can outwork anybody. And I didn't need to have, more 21-year-old friends that wanted to go out and drinking. I just kind of was dedicated. So anyway, stayed at Ziff Davis for a while, did really well there, got recognized, moved out to the West Coast, came back, wound up getting a publishing job at Condé Nast to be a magazine publisher at 26 years old, which was crazy. I mean, and I worked for Golf World magazine, became that publisher. And this was about 10 years later, and I found that goal sheet that I had, and I was super disciplined about it. I had it up in my cubicle, and my wife and I are moving from one house to another, and I found the goal sheet, and I did everything on there in 10 years. And my first reaction was I was mad. I'm like, man, I should have made these things better, because clearly this works. And then so I had a really nice career at Condé Nast as a magazine publisher. Loved it. Wound up leaving there to go work at Ralph Lauren. Ran their golf and tennis and Olympics business. Loved that brand. Loved working there. Loved the people I worked with and for. And after a number of years there, I kind of got an itch to go do my own thing. Or spending enough time at Ralph talking about being an entrepreneur. I left Ralph Lauren to start my own holding company with a private equity partner called Prospect Brands, because I grew up on Prospect Place, and the thesis was to buy distressed assets, flip them, make them successful, flip them, and have an exit. And it was a reasonable success, not a great success. Again, learned a lot through some failures there. But while I was there, I got a phone call from Norwest Venture Partners, who just had made, what was the first institutional investment in a jewelry company called Kendra Scott in Austin, Texas. And we're looking for an outside board seat to name. And I have no idea how they found my name, Brett. I'd never served on a board before. I had nothing to do with jewelry or accessories. Knew nothing about the women's business from a consumer perspective, but flew out to Austin. This was 10 years ago now. Met Kendra in 2013, and we hit it off. I had a sister who passed away about 15 years ago now of a brain aneurysm, my only sibling, and Kendra kind of has become a surrogate sister to me. So two of us kind of hit it off right away. Joined the company. It was doing about 40 million in revenue, and enterprise value is ballpark $100 million. Learned a ton about the brand, about culture, about myself, about all the things I was doing wrong as a CEO. While I was doing that, I went back at my MBA at Chapel Hill, which I'm really proud of. And then 3 years later, we did a transaction with our current minority institutional investor, Berkshire Partners, who's been awesome as well. And they put a total enterprise value in the business north of $1 billion. And at that point, I joined the company full time. And I'll just kind of segue 1 second here to talk about what ultimately got me to join the company. I was living in North Carolina. That's where my holding company was based. Four great kids, and everybody was happy there. And Kendra asked me after the last transaction, look, I'd love for you to join the company full time. And I said, I'm not interested. I grew up on the East Coast, lived on the West Coast for a little while, but moving to Texas to me might as well have been like moving to Saturn. Like it was like another planet.
Right.
It turns out I love living in Texas and being a Texan now 7 years later, but at the time I was not interested. So I was like hard no. I was like, I love being on the board. Very thankful to be a part of this amazing organization, but and if you have me, I'll stay on the board, but I don't think I'm going to move my family to Texas. And she, and this is part of the secrets, one of the secrets of her success. She's incredibly relentless and dogged and amazing, and she's a great salesperson. I knew she wouldn't stop asking me, and she just kept asking and asking. And finally, she's like, look, I want you to go to a Kendra Cares event that we do. And what Kendra Cares means, Brett, is we have something called a color bar in all of our 138 stores where you can create your own jewelry and market on CYO and jewelry 10 plus years ago. We take a mobile version of that and we bring it to hospitals or schools or businesses and try to help people in need through it. So this particular one happened to be a Kindra Cares event at Sloan Kettering in their pediatric oncology ward. And I know we talked about it earlier that we both have 4 children, and I'm a very sappy, emotional dad. I, cry in the movies. I cry when I drop my daughter off at college, and like I've never been in a pediatric oncology ward. Knock on wood. I knew it was going to be a sad place and a place I didn't want to go, and not because I didn't want to help people, but because I didn't want to embarrass myself. I didn't want to embarrass those around me, and I knew I would be emotional in it. So I begrudgingly went because, I knew she wouldn't leave me alone about it. So, and I was in New York for a board meeting for another company I serve on the board of. And anyway, walk in the elevator, like I can remember how it smelled. The doors closed, got up, and right before they opened on the 8th floor in the waiting room of Sloan Kettering's pediatric oncology ward, I could hear like music behind the other side of the door. And I was like, this is wrong. It feels wrong. I might be in the wrong place. And I wasn't. The doors open. We had a DJ, and there was balloons, and there was clowns, and like I made jewelry for sick kids and their families for the next couple hours, and their sisters and brothers and parents and the kids, and it was incredible. Like we turned the saddest place in Manhattan to like the happiest place I'd ever been in, and I kept it together. I was very proud to say I did not get emotional in that room, but got in the elevator, went downstairs, went across the street, completely lost it. I called my family and said, we're moving to Texas. Like I'm never going to get to, impact people's lives the way I just did today. And if I can do that on a larger scale and we can do it more often, like, that's a life worth living. So when you ask, that's how I wound up at Kendra Scott, Chief Marketing Revenue Officer, then President. And then to the point earlier you made, it's, am the first CEO since Kindra, which I don't take lightly. I know what that means for a founder to hand that over to somebody, but I think what that means about kind of the person I am and how I think about it is, I'm an incredibly hard worker. Everything I've accomplished in life, I've had to dig out of the dirt. I haven't been given a lot, handed a lot, certainly in life. I've had to go get it and problem solve it. And I try to do it the right way and be a good example to my parents, my children, because I had great examples by my parents of kind of how to live life the right way, how to work hard, how to be humble, and how to serve. And if anything, the one thing I'd hope people would say about me is that, I never for a second feel like anyone in this organization works for me. I feel like I'm there to serve them. I serve our customers. I serve our employees. I serve my wife and my family. And that's kind of how I'm wired. And I think that combination of a willingness to do whatever it takes and serve other people, and a commitment to work hard and be relentless and dogged and tireless about achieving the things that are important have served me well in life and business.
That's amazing, man. What a run. I mean, what a run. And I'm always fascinated by this thing that, there's in your situation where you grew up, you talked about, you didn't have stuff and didn't know exactly about jobs and interns, and how it can go totally different directions for people, right? There's a lot of Toms that didn't go and aren't the CEO of a big company, right? They're doing whatever they're doing, and that's fine. And then there's people like you. So I'm always curious on if you've ever thought about this. I'm sure you have. But like, what made you different, do you think, that got you to where you've gotten today?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, look, I'm a pretty self-effacing person, if I'm being honest. Like, I don't think much of myself. I think, I know that I work harder than anyone. I don't think I'm smarter than most people, but I care a lot, and I have had some really, really good people around me. I think the difference for me is, I've recognized 2% moments and 2% people, right? And by that, I mean things that don't come along very often, and people that don't come along very often. I think I've had a knack to just recognize somebody and ask for help, right? I think one of the beauties of coming to Kendra Scott, like anything I've ever done, I've done at a really young age, even though I'm not young anymore. I feel young, but I'm not. And I've done in areas that I didn't know anything about. So I had to be curious, right? Like I had to be humble. I couldn't act like I knew everything. And I think that served me really well. And I think too many people, like I'm super passionate about teaching and coaching. Like that is my passion. When I'm done with work, I'll be a teacher and a coach somewhere. Like that's what I want to do. And I think at the end of the day, great CEOs and great leaders are just great teachers and coaches. Yeah. I've had great teachers and coaches in my life. I've had great mentors. I've had a great example of what hard work looked like and being a good person from my father and my mother. I've had a lot of bad things happen, right? Losing my sister, I recognize and appreciate the little things in life. And, so I don't think that I'm different. I think maybe I think differently about things, and I'm willing to put the work in that most people don't. And that is a byproduct of kind of how I grew up. I think the way you
Yeah.
grew up shapes you to, like, I never had anything, so I appreciate everything, right?
Yeah.
And I grew up in a faith-based house, which think also was important for me, kind of shaping how I think about life and stuff. But um, it, I think everybody has the ability to be successful. I think too many people are just afraid to ask for help. Too many people are afraid to put themselves in a position where they're going to fail. And like, life's more about failure than about success. And it's like,
Yeah.
what you do with that failure, I think, is the differentiator and what makes some people more successful than others.
Yeah. I think as I've matured, I know we've each got 4 kids, and our kids are close to the same age. So I'm 46, and I think it's really taken me even in so like in the last few years, like that transparency, the vulnerability to be able to ask for help. I think when you're, I'm picturing you a lot like myself. I was in insurance sales when I was right out of high school or right out of college. I mean, and so same thing. I'm in the cubes. The guys are making $30, $40 a day. I'm like, I'm going to do 100 to the same thing you said. And I could walk down the hall and show you in a blue folder the goals I wrote down in 2001 and exactly how those things came to fruition, right? And now, to your point, I wish I would have thought a little bit bigger back then, but even then, those goals scared the crap out of me. So when you think about what you've accomplished, you talked about working hard, you talked about the 2% moments and 2% people, which I want to dive into a little bit, but how important is that goal writing down younger in your career, but then also now, because I still do it?
I think, just to circle back quickly, Brett, to the point I was making about teaching and coaching, I have the privilege of addressing students often. We do a Kendra Scott Women's Entrepreneurial Institute here at the University of Texas, and I get to, on occasion, address the kids in that class. And then one of the greatest highlights of my life was I gave the commencement speech at the University of North Carolina to the MBA program, which is crazy to think. Like, my dad has a 10th grade education, and I'm standing in the Dean Smith Center addressing MBA students, which is mind-blowing to me. But in those moments, yeah, I always talk about goal setting, to your point and question. I think I tripped into it, right? Like, everything in my life up until that point, I was successful in school, moderately successful in school, very successful in athletics because of work ethic. And I inadvertently set goals of, like, I want to do these things, and I'll, like a maniac, do whatever it takes to accomplish that. What Jason Sparks did for me was synthesize it down into something that I could digest. And I think when you write things down, it makes it real, and then you can hold yourself accountable. I think accountability is really important in life. And too many people don't want to be accountable for their actions, right? For their actions in the office, or actions at home, for just in general. So, like, I think when you put a goal down on paper, number one, it makes it real, and it gives you an accountability and an ownness to yourself. And then what I did, I don't know if you did this too, but I think best practices, like, bring in other people, right? Like, bring in friends, family, bosses, and
true.
Tell everybody, like, these are the things I want to accomplish. And I'm a maniac about a lot of things, and I was maniacal. I still am maniacal about, I don't make decisions unless they map back to my goal. And it might mean, from a career perspective, I take a step or two back or sideways to ultimately to get to where I want. And it served me really well. And again, I don't think, I'm going to corner the market on smarts, but I think just ability to problem solve and discipline and stick-to-itness, and then having a great support system here, at home with my wife and my kids and my family, and at work with, Kendra and our board, and everybody's kind of mapping to moving in this, paddling in the same direction. And I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So
I call that boringly consistent, right? And I would assume that's probably what you just show up every day, man. It's like, when you're a big golfer, right? I gotta show up. I gotta make the 5-footers. I gotta make the 2-footers, and I can worry about the 40-footer, but I gotta make the little ones, right? And so what are those little things that you see in yourself, but also amongst the amazing leaders you've been around over these years? What are those little 2-footers, if you will, the things they practice or the habits and rituals they do every single day that without miss, these are happening in your life?
I think the best people I've been around are well-read. They know, none of them. I haven't been around a person that I'm ever impressed by that thinks they know everything, right? It's just constantly chasing knowledge. I think that's a really critical ingredient. I think one of the things I was always struck by from Roger Farah, who is the president of Ralph Lauren when I was there, and one of my mentors, is like he was very normal, right? He ran a giant organization, publicly traded, Fortune 50 company, best practice, and he was just a normal guy. He was normal and approachable, and I think there's commonalities amongst really successful people of like all of them have an athlete mentality, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
We set themes of the year, and like this year's theme is like have a champion mindset. Last year's theme was have it be a game changing year, and we grew free cash flow by north of 40% and top line revenue by 20%. Like we had a game changing year, but like the willingness to do whatever it takes to get better and hone your craft and be boring about making 2-footers. It's like be really well read, know what's going on in the world. I'm going to read the paper every morning. Like I want to know what's going on. And I also like am in tune. And I think this is a testament to Kendra Scott, the fact that we're now 95% female. It was 99% female when I started. Like you have to be in tune with the people around you as well. And you gotta practice that to make sure that you're understanding what is driving everybody, because people are wired differently. But I think for success, it is really boring. Have a routine. Wake up early. I mean, I wake up really early because I can get my day started that way. I don't have to disturb my wife or the kids or others, and I can get rolling. Get started. And I tell my kids, I'm like, call my daughter in college is at Villanova, and she'll call me and say, hey, are you going to beat Tuesday? Are you going to beat Wednesday? I'm like, hell yeah, I'm going to beat Wednesday. Like that's what you do. So like I think that there's just this like some people have engines that just need, and you got to just fuel the engine and keep it going and not be afraid of other people like not agreeing with you, right? I mean, like I'm not for everybody. My mentality's not for everybody, and that's okay.
It is okay. So talk about that morning routine, but even go the night before. What's that look like for you? Obviously, a lot of stuff going on, man. Running a big company and 4 kids that are busy. So night before and morning of.
Yeah. So I'm a lunatic about time. I think that time is the only currency you don't get more of, right? You can make more money, can't make more time. And like I said earlier, I've had some bad things happen in my life, and it makes me really appreciate time even more. The thing that matters most is my family, right? So I always want to prioritize and make time for my kids and my wife and my parents, and to try to show up and be there for them, and in a way that matters, not in a way that just shows up to like say you're present. So that the night before, and I've got a great support staff, not just at home, but in the office as well. I've got a great executive assistant who's super helpful in helping me map out and plan out what's coming up tomorrow, what's coming up next week, what's coming up next month, to make sure that I've kind of got some visibility into that. And then just allocating time. Like I started saying no to a lot of things and people where I used to not be good about saying no, and it would take me away from my family, and it would take me away from my work. And you referenced earlier, like I enjoy playing golf. I used to play a lot more golf, and I used to be competitive, but I don't think you can be great at 3 things. I think you can be great at 2. Personally, I choose to be a great father and husband and a great leader and show up for my people, and everything else kind of doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
So that's macro how I think about it. From a more micro, it's like, and it ebbs and flows. And I've got an amazing support system here and a great wife who recognizes at times work's going to be a priority and at times it's not, right? So I think that that's really important. And then, the disciplined nature of, I think working out is really important. It's good for your body. It's good for your mind. I'm super disciplined about going to the gym every morning and just doing something to stay active and get things going. And it gives me an opportunity to listen to a podcast or read the paper, while I'm on a treadmill or exercising. And I think that stuff's important too. And our customer they're my boss, and our employees are I work for them. So like, always mindful of like who needs me. And I think a CEO's job is allocating resources and capital, but also putting out fires and making sure you're there for problems and showing up the right way. So I'm kind of always looking for, where are the places I got to show up.
Yeah. So when you think about brand building, you've worked with some amazing brands. What's the theme there? So picture the person listening to this podcast right now, that they own their own company. They're fighting every day to make a difference in their customers' lives. How do you think about brand, and how do you make that brand stand out and be different?
Yeah, well, I'm going to start first with just what I think it means to be an entrepreneur, because it ties back to that. And a lot of entrepreneurs fail and brands fail because the people leading, starting, running those things are not willing to do what it takes to be successful. And when things get really hard, a lot of people fold up and go away.
Yep.
And in my experience, and I've heard this, from people like Ralph and obviously from Kendra and others, I've seen it myself. When things are the hardest, that whole darkest before the dawn thing, like it's true. Like when they're the hardest, most people give up. I think the people that persevere, number one, they're learning a lot through the failures. But number two, when you come out on the other side of it, there's a galvanization that happens and a recognition of like all the stuff you just crawled through to get it done so that you can now be successful. And I think that's a really important ingredient. From a brand perspective, the things that I think are really important, like the consumer is very smart, right? You can't fool them with a clever ad, the way that you could probably in the 80s or even 90s. Like the consumer is really smart. They expect a lot from the companies that they're working with. So I think that ties into the best brands, the brands I appreciate the most are authentic, right? Like, what they stand for, what they're about, they're not jumping the shark as it relates to what they want to be. They are what they are. They're super committed to it. They own it in a very authentic and a transparent way. They're clearly communicative with their customer base and their employees, and it works. You know what they stand for. Like it's Apple and Ralph Lauren and Nike and Lululemon and Kendra Scott and Vuori, and there's brands that like I believe in, Mercedes-Benz and BMW. Like you know what they stand for. Rolex, and I think that there's plenty of examples of brands that are trying to capitalize on a moment in time, and they're going to be high flying for a very short period of time, and then there's no substance there in the people that work there or the product that they're selling or the thing that they're making. And then when the consumer smartens up to that, like they go away. Like the world is littered with those things. And then if you combine that with, a best in class leadership team that knows how to execute and make money and be profitable and do it in a thoughtful way and show up for each other and show up for the customer, like those brands will stand the test of time. And the ones I mentioned have and will continue, I'm sure.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, the best brands I wrote down, best brands are authentic and understand who they are and what they stand for, man. It's pretty self-explanatory, isn't it? But it's hard to do. And it's, to your point, when it gets tough, people think success is just going to go in this straight line. And it's look, I think, I say this a lot, like I think success, I don't think it's that hard. I mean, I know that sounds crazy. Like I'm so fortunate and blessed and lucky and thankful and all the things, but like, I think anybody can be successful legitimately. Like I had no business getting to the place I'm at right now at 46 years old based on my environment. None. Yeah. My athletic talent, my smarts, none of it. And if I can do it, everybody can, but I was willing to work my ass off and do whatever it takes and make sacrifices and be disciplined and be a maniac and show up wherever I needed to go and do whatever I needed to do. And most people aren't. So like it's hard work, but I don't think it's that hard. Just making the commitment and the sacrifices is I think what it takes. And when you go through those things too, like going through COVID, I think when you live through hard things in your life, losing a sibling, losing a loved one, taking a business through bankruptcy, like going through really hard stuff, the other side of it is so good because you've learned so much if you have a good attitude, right? Too many people are woe is me and I can't catch a break and everything's going against me. Like I have a great outlook in life. And, it's my kids when they were little, another strange thing I would do to them or with them, and they still do it today. And my oldest daughter's now 20, and I'll call her and I'll say, Grace, what do we do? Because when they were little kids, before bed, I would say, what do we do? And their answer had to be, we never give up. Like silly and stupid, but 20 years later, I still do it. And it's like, before I drop them off at school, I took my daughter to school this morning. I was like, be a leader. Like I control, and this is a big thing, I think, where people get it wrong. I don't care what anybody else is doing ever. I don't care what other brands are doing. I don't care what other executives are doing. It has no impact on me at all. I don't care what the market's doing. I can't control any of that. I control this. And
every day I want to make sure I'm controlling this the best way that I can, and I'm showing up the best way I can for my family, for our employees, for my parents, for my friends when needed. And if I control that, it's going to lead to pretty good things if I'm disciplined and willing to go through some challenging things, because it's not always going to go my way. And I think most people expect it to go their way, and that's not how life works.
No. What do you do when you've been given bad news? Because clearly that happens, and obviously, you know, with your sister. But let's talk about the business side of that. Something doesn't go the way you want it to go. What's your process to get out of the woe me, the pity party, and get the freaking work, right? Like, I've got a process. I know my process. Like, what is your process?
So this may come off wrong, and apologies in advance, but like, I'm a spiteful person in a lot of ways. Not as a human being, but like, I like when things go wrong. Like, I'm better. Like, we were great through COVID. Like, I was my best through COVID. I feel like I'm my best when things are hardest, because you have to be. I just get really focused, and I get really focused because, to me, it reverts back to, there's a scoreboard now. People are paying attention. I want to prove everybody wrong. I want to prove the people I grew up with wrong. I want to prove the people that went to better schools than I went wrong. I want to prove to people I worked with that said I wouldn't be successful wrong. Like, I revert back to this thing where I want to prove everybody wrong. Like, that's a personal thing. And one of the things I appreciate most about Kendra is she's wired in a really similar way. You know, dropped out of college, like, had a lot of people say she couldn't do things, and like, so that's a motivator to me. And so what I do is I get more focused. I lean in to it a lot more. I never run away from a problem. I always kind of run towards it. And and lead by example through things. I think, you know, when you show up as an executive or a leader or a teacher or a coach, when things are hard and your people or your students or your employees or your family show you out front versus hiding in the back, that makes people want to follow. Like, and I've just had that mentality because, again, it's like, what I can control that, right? I can control how I show up. I can control where I'm positioned. I can control what my output's going to be. And it works. And I have a support system. This is really important. I think I have a support system at home that understands and encourages that. And I think oftentimes, if that's not understood or encouraged or accepted, it makes it challenging to be able to execute.
Yeah. I think if I was a betting man, I would assume your wife is probably pretty competitive, just like you as well.
She is, yeah. She, for sure. Sure is, yeah.
My wife and I were just talking about it this past weekend at Easter. We used when our oldest was a baby, you know, you couldn't really go anywhere. It was like nothing to do or whatever. And we used to race around the house. Right? We're just competitive, right? And I think that does show up, and it matters in business and life. And so it takes me to the question I always ask people is fears. How many of the fears you've put in your mind, right? We're all guilty as humans to put some pretty terrible stuff in our brains. How many of them have actually blown up to the magnitude you put them in your mind to be?
Yeah, I mean, I have this conversation all the time with my family, also my employees. Like, nothing ever happens. The fears are nonsense to me. Like, you know, I have the fears I have. I mean, I tell this to kids when I'm teaching classes and stuff. I mean, people always ask about imposter syndrome, and I'm like, I have it every day. Like, you know, before I walk into a class to teach, I'm like, why these people don't want to hear from me? Like, what do I have to teach anybody? You know, and like, I fear that. Like, I'm afraid of that. It's not real, I don't think. Maybe it is real, but to me it's real. And I think it just makes me show up better because I want to be better for the people that are there. You know, I've got a privilege to teach somebody. Like, I want to show up for them. I would say, you know, so fear in general, none of them ever come to fruition, right? Like, none of it ever happens the way you want it to. Unfortunately, things happen you don't even think about. I never thought my sister would have a brain aneurysm at 23 years old, right? But like, that happened, and you deal with it. I'm scared. The thing I'm most afraid of is fail. I'm scared to death of failing. Like, I'm scared to death of failing my family. I'm scared to death of failing my employees. I'm scared to death of failing my friends. Like, and that is a daily thing. I'm always afraid of failing. And I think, you know, as you've mentioned this, but I think I've always been this way and open to talk to people about it. But even as I've gotten older, I've gotten even more comfortable with just acknowledging the things that motivate me or don't motivate me, or things I'm afraid of, or things that I love. And I think people appreciate that, or the right people appreciate it, and the wrong
Yeah.
people don't. It's like, kind of, I tell my kids, my son, we talked about earlier, my son is a really accomplished golfer, and at the end of a round, he'll beat himself up about what he was scoring. I was like, buddy, what, like, nobody cares what you shot, right? And the ones that do just wish you shot worse.
Right.
So the heck with those people, right?
That's a
But
good
anyway,
point.
that's my man. That's kind of how I think
Yeah.
about that stuff.
So how do you then, on the flip side of that, stay in the moment? And whether that's at a kid event or something, family time, business moment, you're thinking about something else. What do you
It
do to be in the moment?
It's really hard, Brett. I don't think I'm great at it, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
You know, we talk a lot. I'll get a lot of people at interviews saying, what is the company doing? What is the company doing to help create balance in your life? And I'm like, nothing. Like, it's not a company's job to give you balance in your life. Like, I don't have balance in my life, right?
Right.
Like, the day I decided that I wanted to be a CEO or an executive, I had to check balance, life balance, kind of at the door, right? I gave that up because I have to always be on for our employees, because I serve them, as I mentioned earlier. I think what a company's job and responsibility is to provide flexibility so that each person can find the balance that they want in their life, right? Like, I don't like balance in my life. I love working. I love my family, and my life is out of balance, right? I don't get to show up to everything I want to do personally because I have to show up for work. And it's a constant struggle to be present. I mean, this thing, is a great anchor. It's a great luxury because it allows me to be working from home today. It allows me to go to kids' sporting events. It allows me to, peel away sometimes with my wife for a dinner or an event. But I also have to be mindful of it because of my roles and
Yeah.
responsibilities in the organization. So it's awfully hard. I haven't figured it out. And truthfully, I don't know a lot of people that, are successful executives and also successful dad, parents and husbands and wives and partners that have figured it out either.
Yeah. And we talk about it a lot at work is we don't actually believe in balance. We believe in integration, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you're not going to be balanced, like you said, if you're going to want to be successful and do the things that you want to do. It's really, really tough. But you can integrate your life, obviously, and be present and do the things. And that's what you're doing, right? That's why you're a great dad and a great husband. So when you think about Kendra Scott, for example, maybe share something about her, a lesson you've learned from her, because she's built one of the best brands in America, right?
Yeah.
So what have you learned from her watching that in the front row seat?
Yeah. I mean, every day's a learning experience for me. I'm super fortunate that I get to work alongside her and with her and for her. She's a great mom. She's a great friend. She's a great partner. She's an unbelievable business person. And I think what I've learned from her most is that what what people admire about her from the outside is, her kindness and compassion and philanthropic heart and good nature and all those things that people see, and all of it's true in spades. Like, she is all of those things and then some. The thing I always appreciated about her more than that was the dogged, relentless need to win. She has a need, not a want to win, and I'm wired the same way. So, like, I really, I lean into that, and that I appreciate that more than most people. But most people don't know that about her. Like, and by the way, you could not have been 22 years ago as a woman starting a company in Austin, Texas. Like, she had to be
Yeah.
that way to be where she is today. So I admire that about her. What I've learned from her over the years is that I came from very male dominated kind of locker room mentality, hard charging worlds, right? And I only knew that, and I was successful in that, and I just thought that's my playbook and that's what's going to make me successful forever. What I've learned from her and appreciate and love about her is that she really taught me, and I see her do it every day, with the kindness, with compassion, with warmth, with love, with care. You can do both. And I think at most companies, those things juxtapose each other. You're either what I mentioned, former or the latter, right? We do both. Like, we have
Yeah, it's big.
an army of badass female and male employees that need to win but love each other. And I've seen what I thought was good cultures at other places I've worked at, because I've worked at really neat places and great brands, but like none that are even close to the familial nature with this tenacity and voracious desire and appetite for winning that we have here today. And it's remarkable. So like that's what I've learned from her the most, and have appreciated from her and her way with people. I mean, she's really an incredible
Awesome.
person.
Thanks
Great
for
leader.
sharing that. When you think about your career, what would you look back and tell? I think you said you're 46 as well. What would you tell the 35-year-old Tom? What would you tell that guy today?
Uh, I would tell him. I get to ask this question sometimes. I mean, I would tell him, just don't waste time with people and things that don't matter.
Hmm.
Um,
That's so
I think
good.
too many people just waste time. I tell my kids it all the time. Any opportunity I can to wear a teacher or coach hat, like too many people waste time on stuff that doesn't matter. In the world that we live in today, too many people are living in a world of social media, trying to live up to an expectation that's not even real. Um, and it violates the authenticity. Like, you are what you are, and love that person, own it, and just try to get better every day instead of chasing something that's not even real.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it would have turned out if they had those things 15, 20 years ago for me. But I just don't waste time on people that don't matter. Most people, you know, peers I've seen at least, don't want you to be successful, right? They want
Yeah.
themselves to be successful. And I wasted time around people like that. And, I think it's important to realize, like, there's few people that are really encouraging and pushing you forward, and tie yourself to those people, and and push and pull with them to success, and ultimately at the end of the day, like, it's on you, right? Like, no one else is
Yeah.
going to make you successful but yourself. But
Right.
surround yourself with the right people and don't waste time. Like, those things, I think, are good lessons for anybody at any age.
Love it. Last few questions here. When you hear the achieving a future greater than your past, that's our mission statement. So achieving a future greater than your past, what comes to mind for you?
you know I mean, like, that's how I like live my life, right? I mean, I want to beat Wednesday, and then I want to beat Thursday, and then I want to beat Friday and Saturday and Sunday, and then the next. So, I think defining success is really important, right? Some people define it monetarily, other people define it with time with loved ones, other people define it with titles. Some people just define it with philanthropy. Like, I've defined it with making an impact in the world and the people around me, and I try every day to leave something behind. I've had so many people help me throughout my life, and I would be nowhere without them, and I have an obligation to pay that back, um, and help people that need it, because I had so many people help me along the way, through sports and education and mentorship and kindness and teaching and coaching. And, like, I need to do that. And I feel like if everybody did that and cared a little bit more about each other and less about themselves, it'd certainly be a better place to live in.
Amen.
And I think everybody would be more successful. Like, you can achieve more together than alone sometimes.
So I want to end with the comment you made really at the start of the podcast. You talked about 2% moments and 2% people. Spend
Yeah.
some time on that.
Yeah. I mean, it definitionally is kind of what it sounds like. I mean, 98% of things that happen on a daily basis, or 98% of the people you run into, are not going to be standout moments or standout people.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, too many people just overlook or pass by the 2% people and the 2% moments in their life, because they're just accustomed to, having blinders on. So I think it's important to just keep your head up and look around and listen, and be aware of things around you. I think too many people are so self-absorbed and think about themselves and how am I going to feel and how is this going to look, and, like, instead of, like, I'm empathetic to people, right? I think
Yeah.
about, like, how is this making other people feel, and I think because of that, it allows me to recognize and I notice people, right? It's not just people that are going to help me. Sometimes it's people that I'm like, man, that's a special kid, right? I want to lean into them. I want to help them. Like, they're a 2% person. Sometimes it's a 2% job opportunity, right? Or a 2% client that comes along. And I think it's just having an open mind and being aware of recognizing when things happen and then do something about it, right? The other thing I would probably tell myself is like, take action. Too many people like overthink about, man, what happens if this goes wrong? And what are people, I'm like, just do something, right? I've never regretted an action. Like there's consequences from actions, right? Positives and negatives, but like recognize 2% moments, lean into 2% people, act on the things that are happening in front of you, and then react to what the actions were. Like that. And if you can problem solve a little bit and you're willing to work hard, I think you're going to be really successful.
That's awesome. I love it, man. Thanks so much, Tom, for sharing stuff today. Where can our listeners find more of you? Where do you want people to reach out or come find you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I do this when I'm teaching classes and stuff, and people can always email me. My email is tom@kendrascott.com if anybody needs help or if I can coach or teach or do anything. Like I'm always there. I've got a pretty good presence on LinkedIn, and you know, just like you did or your wife did, you know, there in St. Louis, like walk into one of our stores and get to experience what we're doing at Kendra Scott. It's a really special organization.
Yeah. Well, it's been awesome having you, man. It's these are like, you know, we talked about pinch me moments earlier. Like to have guys like you that are willing to spend time with us on the circuit of success. I'm very humbled by that, and I'm very thankful for that. So thanks for your time and appreciate your message, man.
Thanks for what you're doing, Brad. I appreciate it. I hope to see you soon.